So Eskom is still implementing Stage 6 power cuts tonight after more breakdowns at its power stations. Stage 8 load shedding has been a recurring fear as the power crisis in the country appears to be worsening. Let's talk about where we are now with Chris Yelland, an energy analyst. A very good evening to you, Chris. Grateful for your time. So I was just saying before we went on the break, it's been 14 days since the start of 2023. And there's not been, correct me if I'm wrong, a single day where Eskom has actually been able this year to keep the lights on uninterrupted.
That's right. We've had load shedding every single day now since the beginning of the year. It's very different to last year, significantly worse. And demand has been picking up over the last week. And really, South Africa will be back at work, you might say, fully on Monday. So that's really a testing time, Monday. And at the same time as demand is picking up, supply has been problematic, to say the least. Lots of units broken down. There's nothing too unusual about that. It's a kind of a random process, but at very high levels. But worsening the situation is the fact that 3 units at Kusile Power Station are out of action for at least the next 6 months. 1 unit at Medupi is out of action for at least 2 years. And 1 unit at Koeberg Power Station is down for at least a year. So, that just adds to the problems. And, of course, everybody is feeling very anxious. And at the same time, late last week, the price of electricity went up by, well, it's going to go up by 18% on the 1st of April and a further 12% on, the following year. That's an increase of 33% over 2 years. And at the same time as we're having a 33% increase, we're without electricity for about 33% of the time, about 8 hours in every 24. So it really, people are angry. I believe, with the State of the Nation address coming up, it must be heavy on the President's mind. It has significant political consequences, I do believe.
What can he announce, the President, when he speaks at the beginning of February when it comes to Eskom? I mean, we know now from the ANC's recent January 8th statement and the conclusion of its conference that one of the decisions taken there is to move Eskom back to the care of the Minerals and Energy Department. But what more can the President say that would be able to remedy or at least reduce pressure from load shedding in the interim or in the immediate term?
Well, there's not a lot that government can do. Despite the fact that Minister Gwede Mantashe says that he can fix the problem in 6 months to a year, unless a lot more detail on this plan is put onto the table, I personally don't hold much hope for it. In fact, I think its credibility is low unless it can be filled out with a lot more substance. I mean, people are asking, and Minister Gwede Mantashe is saying that there is several thousand megawatts, a lot of megawatts, that is just idling and can be just switched on. Of course, it can't be switched on. That's the point. It's either broken down or it's undergoing maintenance. And somehow he's got to explain to the country how he's going to do maintenance on a major portion of the Eskom fleet without actually switching it off. Until that can be explained, I don't know that's his plan. I had yet to see the details. I'm waiting with great interest and expectation to see how he's going to do it. I certainly don't think that just changing the responsibility, Eskom being responsible, reporting to the DMRE as opposed to the DAP, it solves anything. That is nothing more than shuffling the deck chairs on the Titanic. It doesn't address the underlying issues.
Was public enterprises a failure in its handling of load shedding?
Well, I don't think that the DPE is able to do anything about it either. The bottom line is that the solutions are not going to come from government in the short term.
Right.
The solutions are going to come from the customers in the short term.
What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean that customers of electricity whether they are municipal customers, domestic, commercial, industrial, mining, agricultural customers, are going to have to start taking ownership for their own energy future and recognizing that they are the solution through the installation of self-generation, embedded generation, distributed generation. The more that is installed, solar PV and battery energy storage, the less the demand will be on the Eskom grid and the less load shedding we will have.
But the reality is, times are so tough for many people that it would be a very small portion of South Africans who would be able to do that for themselves, especially when you consider perhaps going fully off the grid, wouldn't it?
I don't think anybody is suggesting going fully off the grid. We're suggesting supplementing one's needs through grid-tied systems, and also the possibility of generating power into the grid. These are the solutions, and they can be implemented quickly. People are very resilient and very resourceful when they have to be. Business, most particularly, when their businesses are threatened, they do install equipment to ensure business resilience and business continuity. I think a huge, massive rollout of solar PV and battery storage is most definitely possible in the short term, and that's where we should look to the solutions.
You said Monday is going to be a big test because more economic activity is expected to resume. When you look at the big test, does that mean that if things continue to worsen on Monday, we'll get closer than we've ever been to a complete blackout, i.e. stage 8?
Look, it all depends on supply and demand. We know demand is picking up. The question is what will happen to supply next week. Will they be able to quickly repair some of the broken down units and return them to service without other units breaking down? The reality is that units are tripping out and being restored on an ongoing basis. It's a never-ending process, and every year this plant is getting older, and every year it's not being maintained as it should. Even in the current circumstances, there are financial constraints, but not only that, there are operational constraints. They cannot do the level of maintenance that they'd like to do without switching off generators and actually increasing the level of load shedding. So doing what one has to do in the short term is going to worsen the situation in terms of load shedding, but of course is important. One has to always maintain, and if you don't and if you neglect it, it comes back to haunt you.
What's the worst case scenario then for Monday, given that it's going to be such a big test for Eskom? Yes, we're hoping more generation units will come back online, but they're breaking down so often that it feels as if the system is a bit of a leaking bucket at this stage.
It was announced not long ago, about a month ago, by the COO, Jan Oberholzer, that as a result of financial constraints and as a result of logistical constraints in actually getting diesel to the open cycle gas turbines, they were only going to run those open cycle gas turbines in dire emergencies, to prevent a national blackout. And they were no longer going to use them for meeting demand during the working day. It is just too expensive. They've run out of money. They overshot their budget by 2 times, and they just don't. They decided not to use them. But just the other day, a few days ago, Eskom have announced that they've reversed that decision again. And I think they must be drawing on the strategic stockpiles of South Africa, the diesel strategic stockpiles that Petro SA holds. And I think Eskom are obtaining supply of diesel from Petro SA, from South Africa's strategic reserves. The question of payment hasn't been resolved yet, but I think this is delving now into the question of national security, certainly national security of supply. And in these sort of circumstances where state security is involved, national security, I think the question of who pays becomes rather moot, because ultimately it's all government. Petro SA is government, Eskom is government, government is government. So It's now just a case of reverting back to trying to limit load shedding to stage 6, whatever it takes, and the cost becomes irrelevant, because in fact the cost of diesel is still lower than the cost of the damage to the economy.
Just on costs then, Eskom has been granted this tariff increase by NERSA, 18% for the first year. That kicks in from April this year, and then 12.75% for the next, right? How far is that actually going to get the utility in as far as pulling itself together and addressing the various financial pressures it is facing?
Well, as you can see from the award, it is a lot less than what Eskom asked for. Eskom asked for 32%, and they're getting 18%. That's for the 1st of April. So it will go quite a significant extent. I mean, it's not a small increase. So it certainly will relieve some financial pressure on Eskom. But it's very far from what Eskom felt they wanted. But I don't think it is realistic to think that Eskom's financial problems can all be pushed onto the customer of electricity. You have to, the impact on the economy has to be borne in mind. You cannot also get blood out of a stone. You increase the price of electricity, by 18%, but there are many, many people who will not pay because you cannot get blood out of a stone. And I believe that there will be significant increases in municipal arrear debts. That problem is not resolved, and this will accentuate the problem. And also theft and non-payment by Eskom direct customers will increase. So putting up the price, there's a limit to what can be achieved before you even result in significant social hardship and even social unrest. And it has political consequences, I must say.
All right, Chris Yelland, good to speak to you as always.